Hello and welcome to Joline Knits a Lot. This is my show about knitting, mostly, and the things I get up to here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. How are you today? It's the end of January, and after a sort of warm week where things were melting and slushy, today is a snow day. We're having lots of big fluffy snowflakes blowing and falling, and it's a very wintry day. So I've put on my Alpenglow sweater. This was a sweater I knit, I think in the summer. It's an Andrew Mowry pattern. And you can find links to this sweater and everything I knit on my Ravelry page. On Ravelry, my name is Joline. And please feel free to have a look at all of my projects there. I do indicate the yarn I've used, the needles I've used. I'm trying to make comments on things I have discovered about the pattern that might be helpful to other knitters, or if I made modifications, like if I made it shorter or longer, I'm trying to indicate that so that can be helpful for other knitters too. How are you? Is it cold where you are? We're in for a few days of cold weather, which actually I'm not too sad about, because I have a really thick book that I'm in the middle of reading, and so snow days are a great time to knit and to read and to just be cozy. I have been knitting. How about you? In the last few weeks, I don't know if you've noticed, but I put up a couple of extra videos aside from the ones that I usually do. One was how to build your own 3D printed sock machine, and one was how to crank a sock tube on that sock machine. My next video that I'm hoping to put together soon is how to turn one of those sock tubes into a sock for yourself. And as you know, I've been knitting sock tubes for every month of the year this year. So I have shown you my January ones, I think last time. And next time I will be, in the next couple days, February 1st, I'll be opening up my February sock tube and I'll see what it is. I can't even remember. I remember that in May there are 2 sock tubes. And I remember that in December I chose a Christmassy one. And that's all I remember. So, which is good. Everyone will be a surprise for me and for you. So that'll be fun. And I'll be knitting sock tubes out throughout the year. And maybe you will join me in this endeavor in knitting socks, sock tubes, dishcloths, hats, whatever you like. But every month choosing something as a sort of palette cleanser and a quick sort of satisfying finishing project. I do have a couple projects that I have finished in a couple weeks. And the first one is this Musselberg hat. If you remember, I was using some really lofty yarn that a friend of mine brought me back from Switzerland. And this is what it looks like. Let me show you what the actual knitting looks like. So I started on this end. This end? They look exactly the same. You start with a small circumference and you increase out. And this is one of Isolde Teague's really, really clever patterns that don't really require you to know your gauge before you start. You just pick your yarn, pick a needle that seems appropriate, and start knitting. And then after a while you measure the gauge that you're getting and you go from there. So you start small and you increase quickly, and then you knit a tube, and then when you get to a certain point, you start doing some decreases, and you decrease right down to the same amount that you started with, and that's your hat. So it looks like this. Well, one really, really long tube and your end. So all of your ends need to be woven in before you finish, because there's no getting back in there. It's just a big, big sort of enclosed tube. And then you take one end and you shove it into the other end. I actually kind of had a tricky time with this the last time I did it. Let's see if I can do it today for you. It's kind of awkward. There we go. So there you have it. It's a double width hat, which is still kind of long. And then I like to double it up like so. And then if you pop it on your head, you've got a pretty cozy hat. If you don't double it up, it's a more slouchy version. Here, let's see if I can model that also. Definitely slouchier, still warm, but for me, and in this weather and on windy days especially, I like to have my ears be cozy. So I will probably, after zhuzhing up my hair a bit, I'll probably wear it with the doubled up collar. Brim? That's my Musselberg hat. And this is a great hat if you're looking for something to use up, to knit through your stash. This is a great option. Much like the Sophie hat, or the Sophie scarf, which I think can be knit in lots of different colors and different versions. You could knit this equally, lots of different colors, lots of different versions, and you could use, if you had a 50-gram skein, to a couple of 50-gram skeins, you could make a reversible hat. And this is a hat I think that would be great for anyone. So if you're looking for stash busting patterns, check out the Musselberg hat, especially because you can knit it in a multitude of gauges. So you can use whatever yarn you want. And that's done. If I'm lucky, I'll get one of my daughters to model it because it looks really cute on them. The other thing that I finished, give me a minute. You know when you plan to do things and then you just totally forget when it comes time to actually do things? I meant to put this project on some sock blockers and I totally forgot. The life of a short-haired woman. And so I had to go get my sock blockers so that I could show you. Anyway, I have knit a pair of DRK Everyday Socks. This is a sock pattern by Andrea Mowry, who has so many great patterns in so many great sizes. Anyway, this is the original version of this pattern in fingering weight, and I knit the DK weight for Christmas this year, and I knit several pairs. They were, I used fingering weight held together, but you can also use DK, and that was a great fast sock knit. But I decided I kind of wanted to try the fingering weight version, partly because fingering weight socks are just a little bit more wearable. They fit into shoes and boots a little bit easier, and more people I know will wear fingering weight versus the DK. DKs are great for days like today when it's snowing and cold, but not everybody has the luxury of being able to stay home so they can wear their DK socks. This is a pair of DRK Everyday Socks I knit using some yarn I picked up at the Prairie Fiber Festival. This is yarn by Rose Hill Yarns. Now, Rose Hill Yarns is a pretty local to me dyer, and every time I'm at an event where she's at, her booth is crazy busy because she does this beautiful, really moody, dyed sock yarns. They're often variegated, which I'm not really gravitating towards a lot, but the colors and the moods of her yarns are just so lovely. And she does these great 50-gram sock sets. The 50-gram sock sets come with 50 grams of the main color and 20 grams of a coordinating tonal solid. This set is called Canoe for Two. And they're just so lovely. I really, really enjoy knitting these. Here's the other one. Now what I did was I took the ball and I divided it in two. I weighed it, divided it in two, so that I could have two same size socks. And did I get that? No. One of them is definitely slightly longer than the other one. I'll survive. It's just I'm a little annoyed because I thought I was going to get the same. That's okay. So yeah, these lovely socks are knit. I use 2.25 needles when I use fingering weight yarn. Your results may vary. This is the tonal solid, and they're a ribbed sock, so you do a whole lot of ribbing. And then a fleagle heel, which is really interesting. So this ribbing, you start from the toe up and you do ribbing until here you do some increases, and then you do a fleagle heel, which is sort of it's a different version of a short row heel. But what's interesting about a fleagle heel is if you were to take this heel and knit it on a top-down sock, it would look like this, which I think is a very familiar kind of heel for a lot of people. And you don't get any holes. I don't have to sew up anything, And you can see here, because of the way that there are decreases here and here, no holes. I'd recommend trying out this heel if you're interested. I'd also definitely recommend Andrew Mowry's patterns. This one in particular comes in a whole bunch of sizes. I made the women's, well, I say women's, sort of an adult medium size, but if you've knit any socks for yourself, you'll kind of know the number of stitches that you usually use. So when I knit socks, I usually knit 64 stitches for myself. And this pattern had a size that used 60 stitches, so that's what I used. And, spoiler alert, I plan on knitting some socks for my sister in a sport weight yarn. And I'm just going to use the stitch count that is appropriate and use the same pattern. So when I knit sport weight socks in the past, I've used 56 stitches, and there is a size in this pattern that uses 52 stitches. So I'm just gonna knit her a pair of these on 52 stitches with my sport weight yarn and the appropriate size needle. They look ridiculous when they're not on a needle or on a sock blocker, which is why I was pretty adamant that I needed to show you them on the sock blocker at least before showing you them off the sock blocker. But those are my DRK everyday socks, and I'm looking forward to giving them a trial wearing them. The DK weight ones are so comfy and really, really gushy because of the weight, but also because of the ribbing. So I'm looking forward to giving these a try as a ribbed sock. And I'm making so many plain stockinette socks from sock tubes from my sock machine that it's nice to have some socks that aren't just stockinette. And so these ones fit the bill. And I'd like to try using this pattern with some self-striping yarn too, because I think that'd be fun. That's the DRK Everyday Sock Pattern by Andrew Mowry. And I will link to all of these patterns that I'm talking about in the show notes below so that you can find them for yourself. And that's all I have finished, sort of. I have been inspired. So like you, probably, I watch lots of different podcasts from lots of different people. And one of the podcasts that I have enjoyed for a long time is The Bakery Bears. Bakery Bears is a podcast put out by a couple living in England, and they both knit, which is really interesting because they both knit different things, and they also design things. So Kay from The Bakery Bears this year has come up with a blanket pattern that uses 2 strands of fingering weight yarn held together. She is dyeing yarn every month, 2 colors, and she's showing you how, which is a bit more ambitious for me. But if you're a yarn dyer or have interest, go check it out right now. It's really cool. But so she's making this blanket using 2 strands of fingering weight held together, and you use about 100 grams every month. And I was inspired, partly because I've really been struck by this urge, and I don't know if it's because it's January and a new year, but I really, really want to use up yarn that I have. I have a stash, and I have certain yarns that I just have not been using, and I don't know why. I don't grab them, but they tend to be heavily speckled yarns or variegated yarns, and they're beautiful, but I'm just not reaching for them. And so I decided I'd see how many of those kinds of yarns I have in my stash to see if I could pull together 12 to make a blanket. And I did. It basically cleared out a shelf in my stash, which when I look at it, makes me really, really happy because I'm using that yarn, and that is giving me a lot of joy. And so every month I have taken a skein of this like either variegated or speckled yarn. I've added it to my special little bag with the sock tubes in it so that every month I can add a portion of this blanket on. And every month Kay from the Bakery Bears will be adding a section to the blanket. So if you're interested, please feel free to go check it out and knit along with me. I'm really looking forward to having a cozy blanket by the end. Now, I was sort of a bit thoughtful with all of the colors that I had, and I created what is sort of a fade-ish. It'll be a cozy blanket in the end. Let me show you the January section. Ta-da! So this is a garter stitch blanket, And it's got some really, really lovely increases along the sides, which I'm not going to tell you about because it's Kay's pattern, so you should go check it out if you're interested. But I have this much done. And really, this was only a few days knitting because it's doubled up, and so it doesn't take that long. I have a funny little stitch marker. This is supposed to be a shrunken head from the Knight's Bus from Harry Potter. And the yarn that I've used is from local to me dyer. Her name is Alison Barnes. And Alison Barnes dyed this color, which is called the Log Driver's Waltz. Now, if you're from Canada and if you're a certain age, you'll remember some national vignettes, which are like little really short films, like the length of a commercial, that would show up on Canadian stations as a sort of heritage moment. And this one is called the Log Driver's Waltz. And most of you, if you grew up in Canada, will know the song. I'm going to link to it below, so you should go check out this really sweet video that I remember very, very vividly from my youth. And I loved watching it. Every time it came on, I would be just glued to the screen because I loved it. And I know all the words, and I always sing along. So check out the Log Driver's Waltz in the show notes below. This is my January section for my blanket. And I can't wait to start February. So once I finished my Musselberg hat and some socks, I decided it was time to cast on another hat. I'm not sure why. I have a few hat patterns that have been in my queue for a little while, and I just feel like knitting them. So I am. And I don't know if it's because of the weather or my urge to to work through my stash and to enjoy using this yarn. So this next project is called the Westerly Hat. And the Westerly Hat is a pattern by Tin Can Knits. Who can do no wrong? When I was at Knit City in Vancouver in the fall, the Tin Can Knits booth was selling paper patterns or paper copies of patterns from their latest book, Lazy Sundays. Lazy Sundays is all about cables. Now, I was fortunate enough to get a free copy of this Westerly hat pattern, and that inspired me to pick up some yarn to make this hat from Longway Homestead, who you know I love. I picked up some white Targhee DK, and if you can knit with Targhee, I recommend it. It is just so like soft and bouncy, and I love it. So I cast on the other day, and I got through a lot of the ribbing, and one row of the cable pattern. Not enough for you to even see what I'm doing, but just know that I'm making some really sweet gushy cables. This hat should fit me, and if it doesn't fit me, it'll fit somebody. That's the great thing about hats. So yeah, just some cabling in this beautiful creamy Targhee DK, and this hat should use up most of this yarn. So I'm really excited. I'm knitting a hat with some beautiful yarn that I love. It's going to use up most of this skein, and in the end, I'm going to have a lovely hat that'll probably go in a gift pile for a time in need. So this is the Westerly hat. More on this later, but I'm going to pop a picture right here so you can actually see what this hat looks like. I chose to do the longer brim, again, because I don't like for my ears to be cold, and especially if it's windy outside as I'm walking my dog. A hat that's folded up just tends to keep my ears cozier, and I don't know if that's because I'm old or just sensitive, or if I'm old and sensitive, whatever. I just like a folded brim. It keeps my ears cozy. And that's the Westerly hat. And keeping in the vein of Lazy Sundays, I've been working on my Wander sweater, another pattern by Tin Can Knits from the same collection. And this again is yarn that I picked up while I was at Knit City in Vancouver. I'm discovering that I'm really enjoying using up yarn that I've just gotten recently and not letting it languish in my stash for too long. And I think that maybe that is what's driving my desire to use up, if I can, yarn from my stash so that I can be in a position to purchase yarn and then use it right away, instead of buying yarn and letting it sit in the stash and waiting for the right pattern to come along. Yeah, I'm gonna see. I'm a work in progress, just like everybody. And I think I'd like to see how that feels, to be able to work down a lot of my stash and to just be able to get the yarn that I want to use when I want to use it. I think that the one thing that will, or the one area of my stash that won't see this happen quite so much is my self-striping sock yarn, just because it's really nice to have a little shop of self-striping sock yarn to just go and grab a skein when I want to knit a pair of socks. So I am enjoying having those yarns, but the other yarns I'm sort of wanting to work down. And so that's, I think, what's driving this desire to work through my stash. Anyway, back to the Wander sweater. This is a top-down sweater, again by Tin Can Knits. And if you are wondering why everybody talks about Tin Can Knits so much, it's because they're fabulous. Their patterns are amazing. They are great for beginner knitters. They have a whole series of patterns that are designed for beginner knitters with simple stitch patterns, and they're free. They come in an assortment of sizes, so you can knit something for your whole family, and they do great tutorials. So if you're ever wondering how to do a certain technique, they've probably made a tutorial with really excellent pictures, and it's all on their website. So go check out Tin Can Knits. If you don't know them, you will love them when you meet them. And I have had the great fortune of meeting the Canadian half of Tin Can Knits several times. In fact, almost every time I go to Knit City in Vancouver, I see them and I stop by their booth and admire their patterns. And often I buy their books or their patterns. I like to support them because of how amazing I think they are. And so this is the Wander sweater. Again, I picked up a paper pattern for this while I was in Knit City, and the paper pattern came with a code so that I could have an online version as well. So again, top down, and you'll remember maybe that when I started this, I cast on with the needles recommended, and it just didn't seem big enough for a neckline for me. So I frogged out that ribbing and I started again. I did a tubular cast on. I did a tubular cast on this time, and I can link below to my video that describes this technique, which is an Italian cast on, or I think it's just called an Italian cast on, but have a look. Or maybe it's a long tail provisional cast on, long tail tubular cast on. I will clarify myself right here. Anyway, this is the cast on, and you can see that I have been making great progress on the cables. So I have got some sleeve holes on my Knitting Barber cords, and you know what? This was a great purchase. I really do enjoy using these for holding stitches and then putting them back on the needle. These tubes, if you can see there's a small hole in the end, and you can put that on the tip of your needle and then draw it through. So this works best, I have found, with metal needles. I like to use Licca wooden needles, and it works, but it tends not to be quite as grippy on the wooden needles as on the metal needles in my experience. However, I have gotten them to work. It's not a big deal. So you can stick this onto the end of your knitting needle and draw the tube through so that all of these stitches are now on hold. And then when you're ready to pick them up, you simply stick your knitting needle back in the little tube and pull the needle this time through and the tubing out. And then you've got your stitches back on a needle. It's great. Love them. So check those out. They come in like everybody's favorite color. So if you have a favorite color, they probably have it. I got some orange ones for my friend. I have seen purple, hot pink, greens, everybody's favorite color. Anyway, so I have these stitches on hold for sleeves, and then I have been working on the body, and I have knit about 10 inches from the underarm down. Now this sweater, because you'll notice here that the background of the stitches, or of the cable section, is garter stitch, and the back of the sweater is stockinette stitch. They don't knit to the same depth. Garter stitch or garter rows aren't as long. They kind of bunch up a little bit. vertically. So they're not as big vertically as the stockinette stitch. And so that when I get to the sides, the stockinette section is longer than the garter stitch section. Now, this will block out a little bit, but not totally. And what's going to happen is that the back side of my sweater will be slightly longer than the front side of my sweater. And that's fine. I have seen some knitters do short rows in the front to try and lengthen it to be the same, but I'm okay with it being a little longer in the back and shorter in the front, partly because I think that this garter section will stretch out a little bit, and also that's the intended look of this sweater. Now the sweater size that I'm knitting is gives me about 4 inches of positive ease, because I wanted this to be like a sweatshirty kind of sweater. But that put me in a size that I think, because of Tin Can Knit's sizing range, and they go from itty bitty baby to like 5 or 6 XL, it put me in a size range that is almost, I think, sort of sitting the fence between men's and women's sizing. And the only reason I say that is because the length of this sweater, or the intended length, is quite long. Like it would be a tunic on me, I think. So I am going to knit this sweater to the length that I want, or that I like. And for me, that usually means a body of about 15 or 16 inches in length from the armpit down. So, and this pattern instructs you to measure on the stockinette side and not the garter side. So if you remember, the garter side is going to be a bit shorter because of the nature of garter stitch. It just isn't as long, or the stitches don't sit as tall because it's a mixture of knitted and purl stitches when you look at it from the right side. But the stockinette side are all these long knit stitches on the right side, and so it sits longer. So as I knit it as I measure it from the underarm down on the stockinette side, I'm going to aim for about 14 and a half stitches before I start the ribbed hem. And that's just my preference. And that's the really nice thing about knitting, is that you can knit your sweaters to the length that you like. And as you know, I have complained in the past. Complained? I'm really sorry if I complained. I've commented. I have remarked on the fact that my arms are not very long, and that sweaters are, patterns anyway, are often too long for me. Now this sleeve I did knit for myself, and it does come quite long, but I actually quite like it, this length. And I'll probably aim for knitting the sleeves on this sweater to be a similar length to these ones. And that's the other great thing about knitting, is that you can choose what fits you best. So I'm gonna, now that I have this sweater on today, I'm going to be measuring the sleeve length so that I can knit the sleeves on this sweater to be about the same length as the sleeves on this sweater. Now, the tricky thing about sleeves is that they can be affected by how deep your yoke is. So if you had, let's say, if I was making a really oversized sweater and there was more room between here and, let's say, my armpit on my knitted piece, then if I knit the same length of sleeve, it would just end up longer on my body. So you do have to kind of keep that in mind. And a good measurement to use then is from the your neck, or the top of your neck band, if you like, measuring down the sweater this way along the top of your arm to here. So that measurement is not going to change depending on, it doesn't matter how deep your yoke is. The yoke could end here, but the measurement that you like from your neckline to your cuff is going to be the same. So that's a different measurement that you could use for making sure that your sweaters fit you in the way that you like. So that is my Wander sweater, and I think it's coming along really nicely, except for the time when I forgot to switch from knits to purls and had to go back and fix a whole bunch of garter stitch. Happens to everybody. And that's all I have on my needles today, but I do have something that I wanted to show you because I swatched. I did. And it wasn't for gauge, but it was for color. And if you remember last time, I was showing you some yarn as a possibility for knitting my Shift Again cardigan, which is a pattern that has just come out by Andrea Mari and I'm quite excited about. So I showed you a couple of yarns that I had in my stash that I was thinking about using, and I made a very small swatch. Now this is not a swatch that is big enough to assess gauge, but I just wanted to see if the colors were what I wanted them to be. So this is my little swatch. Oh, and I like it even better on screen. This is some Bougie Beaver by Magpie Fibers. This fiber is called Dyed in the Skein. Now I'm going to be using a different yarn base, but the same color. Now the tone may vary slightly, but I'm pretty confident that I'm going to like how it turns out based on this cute little swatch. And this massive skein is my contrast color. It's a skein of some sport weight hand spun yarn that I got at Knit City. See, I'm using all this yarn that I just got and it's so exciting. This is some yarn by the Fiber Goddess, and it was a really beautiful cake of yarn until I tried to reskein it, and when I reskeined it, my yarn winder broke. It's a tale of woe that I won't bore you with. Needless to say, I've ordered some replacement belt parts, and I'm sure it will be fine in the morning as soon as those replacement parts show up. But I am really, really happy with my little color swatch. I took the pattern of the color work from the Shift Again, and I just did a quick little repeat to see if I was gonna like how it's looking, and I really think that I am. The Bougie Beaver, I can't get enough of that colorway name. Bougie Beaver is sort of a neutrally peachy pink color. And then with these pops of like marled blues and limey greens that are going to fade into like teals and navies, I think it's just going to be fabulous. So I'm super excited about that. And that's all the things that I have been working on lately. I have to say, I have been really enjoying using my bullet journal, which I don't talk about much on here, but I have been using my bullet journal to sort of plan what projects or what things I want to be working on in terms of my knitting each month, and then planning ahead just for the next month so that I have an idea of where I'm going, and I'm really enjoying that. It could be just that I really like the organization and the planning part of things, and then checking things off a list as I complete them, but I have to say, I've really been enjoying that. It's not for everybody. I totally understand that, but it gives me an idea of what, like if there are gifts that I want to be knitting in the next month, or what things I'd like to complete in the next month. And by doing that, it sort of motivates me to work on those projects so that I can get them done and move on to the next thing. Again, it's not for everybody, but maybe it's something you'd like to try. I've just been using a page in my bullet journal where I write the month and what things I want to get done, and then what things I want to start or finish in the next month. So things like for February, it looks like finish the Westerly Hat, the February section of my blanket, my February sock tubes, and some socks for my sister's birthday. So whenever sort of knitting goals you think are realistic for yourself, you can write those down and then have the satisfaction of checking them off when you finish them, or completely ignore that idea and do whatever you like. I'm all about suggestions and not about actually making sure that you do these things. As with everybody, it's fun to find things that work for you. Like for me, working through my stash is really giving me a lot of satisfaction right now. That will probably change at some point, but for right now, I just want to take advantage of that feeling and roll with it. So whatever works for you. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this really snowy, blowy day at the end of January. I hope that wherever you are staying nice and cozy and enjoying the things that you like to do. So maybe you're going to be working your way through a really long murder mystery like I am while knitting on some fun projects. Or maybe you'll be curled up with some crochet and a fire and a cat. Or maybe you'll do none of those things and go on vacation to Hawaii. All of them are good. And I hope that whatever you're doing in the next couple of weeks, you find time to do the things that you enjoy. I know I plan on knitting a lot. I'll see you soon. Bye.